The opening scene shows a doi boy club located somewhere in Thailand. A doi boy club is basically a house for male prostitutes. A certain man named G walks into the club and takes a seat by the bar. As he watches the performer Sorn upstage stripping off his clothes, G starts having flashes of an incident from the past. At the end of the performance, he meets with Sorn, whom he seems quite familiar with, and they soon end up in the room together. Later into the night, G goes back to meet his pregnant wife Sam, who is still awake because she's waiting for him to come home. She wonders why he keeps staying out late at night. Meanwhile, Sorn rides to the karaoke where his girlfriend B works. He takes her home after her shift, and upon getting to the house, B takes off her wig to let her curly hair fall down. Sorn comes over to gently massage her shoulders, trying to relieve her from stress, and B suddenly brings out some money. She places it in his pants and informs him that it's her support for the rent. Sorn whispers into her ears, asking her to go lay on the bed. He climbs on top of her and begins to gently massage her. For a moment it seems he forgets that he's not with his client as he asks her the usual question. He always asks if she prefers to be on top or the bottom. B gets on top, and they begin to explore each other's lips and other parts of their bodies. This gives us a revelation that Sorn is bisexual. The following morning, B wakes up early to prepare for work. She asks for his opinion on what shirt to wear, and after he picks one, she kisses him goodbye and dashes out of the room. A few minutes later, Sorn gets off the bed and prepares to step out. He stops by a temple with his friend Korn, and then they make their way to the Myanmar-Thailand money exchange and transfer office. They want to get a passport and would like to do it legally, so they will be able to make more money. The lady informs them that they will need certain documents before they can board a plane, which will cost them 20,000 baht, or else they will need to go through the border. Korn makes his payment while Sorn stares at a banner displaying the sea hanging from the wall. He is lost in his daydream until Korn hits him back to reality. He struggles to let go of the money because it's all he's got. Korn forces the money out of his hands, and he exclaims that he's now broke. Korn makes a joke of him, asking him to call his client G and requests some cash to purchase a new phone. They ride off to work, and the manager suddenly makes an announcement that the government has instructed all entertainment industries to close down for 14 days, and that includes their club. The men are not taking the news pleasantly, as it means they will be jobless. However, the manager quiets them down. He asks them to get ready, as customers will be packed in their club today, as it is the last day before the closure. That morning, G leaves his house and sits in the car smoking, while lost in thought for some time. Later in the day, he's about to pay his bills after eating at a local restaurant when some set of men walk by. The man who seems to be their leader threatens G to carry out an assignment if he doesn't want to lose his life. He makes sure his threats sink in before heading out like nothing happened. What could be happening? Of course, G doesn't want to depart this world without even meeting his child, nor does he want to be gone too soon. He very well understands what the man is talking about. Later on, he makes arrangements for some guys, and they hunt down a particular man. He executes the man while his boys take care of the body. That night, he cleans up and puts a call through to someone, informing them that he will take the job. Afterward, he stops by his favorite doi boy's place. As Sorn is gently massaging his back, he starts up a conversation, asking about what Sorn's life was like when he was a soldier. Sorn recalls his past and shares it. He is living peacefully as a monk, until some soldiers come to forcefully enlist them into the military. They take them to go fight the war with Myanmar. One day, he suggests fleeing to Thailand to one of his monk friends. His friend refuses to follow him back then because he prefers to stay where his food and shelter are guaranteed. Sorn feels he needs to make the right choice for his future's sake. He then takes on a job as a construction worker and a server. He and his friend Korn save up some money and hire a driver to take them to Chiang Mai, which they always admired on TV while staying at the monastery. They eventually arrive in the town, thanks to the driver who smuggled them in, claiming he wants to deliver groceries. Then, they learn about the job at the doi house, hearing it pays really well. He and Korn make their way to see the manager, who instantly changes his name from Juan to Sorn. It turns out that the manager is getting fed up with having too many people named Juan in his club, and that's how his name suddenly became Sorn. A change of town, country, and even identity is great. On their very first day, they get prepped for their work. They feel some weirdness at the start, but get used to it as time goes by. He takes a break from his story and gently caresses G's skin, like a girl flirting dirty with her man, as he asks G to guess what he purchased after getting his first paycheck. Back to the story. He needs to blend in with Thai people as much as he can, because whenever the police spot foreigners with the green army shoes he had, they often ask to see an ID. So he had to purchase a new pair of shoes as he is terrified of the police, who are always extorting money. He thinks the police are dickheads. The conversation between them lingers much longer as G shares a few things about his job and how they rioted and eliminated a man who caused social conflict and disharmony while blaming it on the government. Soren asks to come with G after their session ends and informs him that the club will close the next day, expressing that he doesn't know what he's going to do with having only 400 baht left. Thankfully, G agrees to his request and asks him to come with him. Later, they are out in G's vehicle and G shows him his next target, a 22-year-old guy by the name of Wuth. The young lad is hanging some posters on some walls not too far off. He turns towards Soren and asks if he'll be interested in working as a guide. All he will have to do is show him and his friend around Myanmar, Soren's hometown. Soren's face changes from a smile to a somewhat confused look. He wonders how G intends to enter Myanmar because the borders are closed due to the outbreak of COVID-19. He's not ready to go back to his hometown yet, so he turns down the offer. G drags a few puffs from his cigarette stick and smiles as he looks at Soren from the side of his eyes with a weird smile on his face. Later into the night, Soren comes to pick B up, and she doesn't look too cheerful. She informs him that there weren't any customers throughout the day, and she didn't get any tips. She's even more saddened because the bar will be closing tomorrow. He kisses her cheek and shares a few words of encouragement in a bid to cheer her up before driving off. Seems Soren might just be a romantic. Immediately his bike takes off, and a vehicle parked a few distance away starts and begins to follow behind them. It turns out to be G, who is following them until they arrive at the apartment. He remains in the car and watches as Soren and B make their way inside the house. Could G be having some wicked plans because Soren refused his proposal? Later that night, B gets off the bed to put on the fan, but she realizes that their electrical supply has been cut off. She wakes Soren up, asking if he paid the rent already, as she already gave him the money. He tries to explain to her that he borrowed her money to get his passport ready, and that he'll definitely pay it back. She doesn't like that he made such a decision without informing her. She angrily points out why he should have thought about it before making such a decision. The next day, Soren and Korn visit the Myanmar-Thailand Exchange Center to know when their passports will be ready. Unfortunately, the lady they meet doesn't even know when it'll be ready, and when they ask for a refund, she tells them that it's too late to get a refund. She uses the pandemic as an excuse, and it doesn't make any sense to Soren why he can't get his money back. He soon starts yelling. Korn stops him and drags him out so they can take their leave, instead of creating a scene when she didn't force them to make payments. Both of them go in search of a labor job. As of now, they are willing to do any type of job to make ends meet during this period of their wait. They stand by a roadside where other people seeking menial jobs are gathered, waiting for a vehicle to drive past and request workers. In a short while, a vehicle comes requesting for 5 workers, and both men jump in immediately. Korn isn't really concerned about the type of job as long as he gets paid. He feels relieved and hopeful. It's quite unfortunate seeing how hard their lives have suddenly become, and now they are facing a situation where they must make ends meet. After what seems to be a long ride, they arrive at the location where they are to install the name of the company at the very top of the building. While they are working on the rooftop, Soren notices some birds flying from a distance. He decides to take a look in the direction where they are coming from, and is quite horrified to see a fire burning through the forest very far away from the city. The fire must be related to the war, as his country shares a close border with Thailand. The police soon arrive at the location, and before he gets the opportunity to take off like the others, they nab him. Soren ends up in their custody for not possessing a work permit or other document that will grant him freedom. The lieutenant threatens to lock him up, refusing to listen to anything he has to say. Soren doesn't like the police, and yet here he is. He gives up as sadness engulfs his face. To his surprise, G comes to the rescue dressed in a police uniform. G takes a seat on the chair opposite him, which the lieutenant vacates for him, and he starts questioning him to know what brought Soren to the station. It feels like a thoroughly cooked scheme to intentionally arrest Soren. Let's find out. With a hint of mockery in his voice, he asks Soren if he hasn't gotten his passport yet. Soren is surprised that he even knows the name of the lady processing his passport. G lays it bare before him and reveals to him that it's either he goes to jail or he becomes the guide he and his friend need in Myanmar. Soren doesn't want to go back to his country. The struggles he went through in the course of escaping are still fresh in his memory, and he doesn't want to experience it one more time. At least not yet. However, he doesn't have any choice, so he asks him if he will be able to return to Thailand after crossing the border. This is when G brings out a passport from his pocket. He opens the passport, which already has Soren's details. He informs Soren that the passport is only a partial payment, as he will be paid money once he finishes the job. He makes sure that Soren makes a promise to offer his help before letting go. Later that night, Ji frees Sorn and takes him to abduct his next target. He ties Wuth down and asks him why he is so concerned about human trafficking, even risking his life over it when he doesn't know who he might be dealing with. Sorn watches as Ji interrogates the young boy and his confidence in defending what he believes to be right. Wuth confronts Ji about not having a conscience for taking people's lives and questions if he will treat his family members in the same way if they are sitting in his place. His words are patriotic, sympathetic, and true, but they hit the wrong spot in Ji's heart as he angrily lands a slap on Wuth's cheek. Wuth is fighting for the cause of his friend and lover named Poom, who was unjustly executed for going after the country's high-ranking officials and executives involved in human trafficking. Wuth found out when Poom was still alive, and he had shown him some of his evidence, including his plans to expose them. Back to the present, Ji masks Wuth and takes him on a ride with them. On Sorn's request, he informs him that they'll need to get Wuth ordained at the temple where he was ordained and everything will be over. He further reveals that he is supposed to get rid of Wuth, just like he did to Poom, but he doesn't want to take the young lad's life because he has committed enough sins. Sorn stares at him as he drives. He wonders why Ji started executing all these people in the first place. Ji simply tells him that he didn't have a choice back then, but he now does because he has Sorn. He smiles and pats Sorn's head without answering his question regarding whether he has a choice or not. They approach a checkpoint and Ji gets down from the car to go take care of it. Immediately after he leaves, Wuth starts begging Sorn to untie him so they can run away together. Ji soon gets back to the car, and to his surprise, both Wuth and Sorn are nowhere to be found. He quickly calls for backup before the boys can get too far. Meanwhile, Wuth splits up with Sorn, saying that he cannot trust him. He thanks him and takes a different route. After a long chase, Ji and the police catch both of them. They bring the boys back to the vehicle, and he tells Sorn never to run away again, then he proceeds to continue the journey. On the ride, Wuth breaks down and informs Ji that he heard all he said about Poom's passing. Ji interrupts him and reminds him that he's supposed to execute him already, but he is risking his life right now. Or else, Wuth will already be gone if he doesn't take him across the border. The sad thing is, it is not only Wuth's life he will have to end, but also his parents, siblings, and friends' lives. He tries to make the young lad see that he's only trying to help, but it doesn't matter to Wuth if he loses his life. If only they would stop erasing people for trying to tell the truth. They soon get to a point where they need to walk a little more distance. They all stop to take a look at the burning forest that Sorn had seen from where he was working earlier. Ji sets Wuth's hands free so he will be able to walk more comfortably. They take a break for a few minutes, and Wuth cries his eyes out once more as he recalls Poom's passing. They soon continue walking, and just when they get to an opening in the forest, a gun gets pointed at their heads. Sorn turns to see his old friend Yoon, the one who refuses to follow him to Thailand. Yoon rounds them up and asks the other officers to grab the other two with Sorn. The three of them are taken to a military base. The commander comes to see Sorn, who fled from being a soldier, and he can't help but wonder why he is coming back. He yells as he interrogates and blames Sorn for abandoning his family to fight the war which they are yet to win. In a moment of rage, he orders the other officers to lock up Sorn immediately. As commanded, Sorn is locked up in a local cell. His friend locks his feet with their locally made cuffs. Sorn reminds him that they are friends and it won't be nice to leave him in there all by himself. Yoon takes a look at his face and curses him for coming back. He turns around and exits the prison. Meanwhile, Wuth reveals his thoughts to Ji. He thinks Ji intends to torture him by making him live in hiding so he will feel better about himself. He tells Ji that it is too late as he has already taken someone's life and he can no longer redeem himself. Yoon suddenly walks in on them and sets them loose. They continue their journey through the forest without Sorn. Wuth insists that Ji follows his boss's command and just ends his life already. Ji questions if he hasn't realized that the only reason he's being spared is that he wants to quit. Wuth scoffs. He believes there's no quitting for Ji because the system is messed up, and soon enough it'll collapse and crush everyone under it. Ji spots someone coming. He tells Wuth to hide and quickly runs to attack before the person gets close. He struggles with the man who seems to be overpowering him until Sorn appears and intervenes by hitting the guy from behind. Apparently, Yoon set his friend free that night, and he's surprised to see that Wuth and Ji are not yet back in Thailand. He leads them through the forest complaining, while Sorn explains why they are yet to return to Thailand. They take a break, and Ji reveals that he will be leaving Sorn to take Wuth to the temple, because he needs to return to Thailand. He explains that they will be all doomed if, by morning, his people are unable to contact him. Ji hands Wooth his belongings and pleads with him to stay back because he will have no choice but to end his life if he returns to Thailand. Yoon asks Sorn to do him a favor by asking Ji to shoot his shoulder before he leaves. Ji suggests he use his gun so it'll be more believable. A clever idea. The next day, Ji makes it back to where he parked his car the previous night. He gets in and takes out a stick of cigarette as he ponders on the recent events in his life. Wooth's devices are safely tucked in behind the driver's seat. The devices contain data on those involved in human trafficking in their country. Meanwhile, Yoon returns back to the camp, leaving Sorn to continue the journey with Wooth. Sorn and Wooth see a river while walking to the temple, and they decide to take a swim. They ease up a little, and Wooth begins to share his pains and how he feels about the craziness in his country. He wishes he could do something to make his home country a better place. It becomes an emotional moment as Wooth wraps his hands around Sorn while sharing his pain until the rain soon starts. They eventually arrive at the temple, and Wooth's hair gets shaved, as is the norm for those who want to become monks. Sorn assists him with wearing the garment and settling in. They step out later to get some fresh air. Wooth admits that his mind runs wilder here in the temple. Sorn smiles and advises him to think of it as another home. Then, as that is the only way for him to get used to the place. Sorn takes a look at the temple where he was once a monk. Meanwhile, Wooth stares at his face with some thoughts in his mind. He brings a passport out of his bag and gives it to Sorn. Ji left it behind for him so he could return to Thailand with it. Sorn falls to the ground in appreciation while Wooth picks him up. It's his dream come true, and now he can have a better life. In Thailand, B returns back to the apartment, and Sorn is nowhere to be found. She walks around quietly, and then finally sits on the bed, as she looks at nothing in particular. At Ji's home, his wife hears the sound of his vehicle. She gets up to watch him from the window, and then goes out to welcome him. Upon getting outside, her husband is nowhere in sight. She walks around in search of him. She looks puzzled as she wonders where he suddenly vanished into. One can only hope the bad guys have not gotten their hands on him. B meets up with her friend who notices her long face. She suggests that B file a missing person report, which she refuses because nobody reports an alien missing, and most importantly, no one will care about it. She feels sorry for him because the system will only extort him for not having documents. Her friend advises that she stay with one of their clients who is a sugar daddy, at least for the meantime, since he's offering her lots of material things like a house and a car. After the event, she decides to heed her friend's advice. B meets up with Mr. Ming, and as they are about to get down to business, memories of Sorn and her keep replaying. She holds still, because she needs to make money to survive. Meanwhile, Ji's wife becomes more worried as she hasn't seen her husband yet. She stops by the police station to ask his whereabouts from his colleagues. The inspector tells her not to worry, as he has sent out men in search of Ji. B finally gets the car she wants. She is packing her bags into the car when she hears some noise. She turns to find protesters on the streets. At the Buddhist temple, Wooth joins them in their routine prayers, even though he's mostly lost in thoughts. He's still grieving Poom's passing, and he has to deal with disappearing from his country, just so he'll be protected by the high-ranking officials who take down anyone who intends to expose their evil deeds. What a world. Unfortunately, Ji ends up in the hands of the bad guys. They tie and lock him up in a container, which they throw into the depths of the ocean, so there will be no escape for him. A sad end. The story comes to an end as Sorn makes his way through the forest. He is ready to go to Thailand once again. This time he can work legally to make a proper livelihood for himself.